Hey, I'm Michael Dorinda,
And I'm Jake Bennett.
and welcome to episode 190 of the North Meet South Web Podcast.
190 episodes in. Dang, man. That's a lot. What are we going to do
We've
for
been
the
at it.
200?
Oh, who knows? So we need another 10.
We'll
We'll
get,
get we'll get another 10 in between
now in Laracon?
now and Laracon.
Meet up for
Uh,
Laracon?
yeah, what are we? Beginning of April. Yeah, I think so. We'll April, May, June, 246. So maybe it'll be just after
It'll be right
Laracon.
close. It'll be right close. Well,
It'll be pretty
we could
close.
squeeze another one in, maybe a couple mini episodes or something, so that we can record our 200th episode at Laracon 2026. That'd be pretty sick.
Do it face to face. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Can we
Yeah.
talk
Okay,
about
dude.
Laracon?
Okay, let's talk about it real quick.
I was talking to a friend of mine on Saturday night, and he's just gone to Canada for a week. And I said, oh yeah, I'm doing the same thing. He's flying through Brisbane as well. And I said, are you on the little plane? Because they use like their Embraers to fly. They use, for some reason, they use a smaller plane to fly Adelaide to Brisbane, which is a further distance than they do Adelaide to Sydney. And I suppose it's capacity, like more people going to Sydney than they are going to
Sure.
But I said, oh yeah, no, I'm on this flight, you're on the same one. And I opened up the airline app to look at my booking and realized that there was an extra flight in there.
Bizarre.
At some point between when I had booked my original flights at the beginning of February to go to Boston and this weekend, just gone, the Easter weekend, the flight had been rescheduled. So instead of going Adelaide to Brisbane to LA to Boston, I was now going Adelaide to Brisbane to Sydney to LA to Boston.
And they weren't going to bother to tell you? Would you miss a connection or anything, or no?
Well, here's the thing, right? It would have been okay. There was no communication. I got no email through, because I booked the flights through booking.com. So I got no email from them, and I got
because
no
they're just a reseller,
email.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah. They're considered a travel agent in this context. So I got no email from booking.com, and I got no email from Qantas. It was purely by accident so at some point in the last
to be looking at
2 months it changed. The problem was that the connecting flight from Brisbane to Sydney left 2 hours before the first flight into Brisbane arrived.
Yeah.
So I landed in Brisbane at 4 p.m. and the Brisbane to Sydney flight left Brisbane at 2 p.m. So
that's going to be a tough connection. That's going to be a tough connection.
Impossible connection. Infeasible, some would say. So time
zones. Maybe.
Yeah, Sunday, because this was Saturday night. So Sunday I called Qantas and was like, hey, what's the go here? And they said, oh, you got to call the travel agent. I was like, okay. So I got onto booking.com and they're like, oh, yeah, we'll get you on like alternative flights, but they have to match exactly in terms of cabin class. They can't, you can't go from premium economy to economy. So they're like, they have to find airfares that are exactly the same end to end. And so they did find me flights, and it ends up being Adelaide, Sydney, LA, Boston.
Oh, great. Easier. Fantastic. Even one less connection. Yeah.
So yeah, they're like, yep, no worries. We'll do that for you. It won't cost anything. The airline changed the flight. So all good. And then about 10 minutes later, because then there's like the customer service person puts the request in, and then there's like the team that processes it. So like 5 minutes later, I get this email saying, oh no, unfortunately, there's no flights available. You'll have to cancel. And I was like, what do you mean? Literally, they just told me that it was fine. Apparently, there was like one flight or one booking left, and it got snapped up.
Yeah.
So
dang it.
So there's this whole thing then. So I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do? They're like, they can't do anything. It has to be exactly the same. And because it's closer now, we've got to rebook. So they have to cancel, refund the money, which can take 2 weeks because of course it does. Because then they have to ask the airline if they're allowed to do it. And at this point, I'm like, it's 3 months until I bought those flights when they were on sale in February. So I had to pay an extra $2,500 or something for the flights now.
Oh my gosh.
I've got better, I think arguably better flights. So it's Adelaide, Sydney, Dallas, Boston on the way over, and then Boston, LA, Sydney return. And I've got more even connections. So it's about three hours each one.
Dude, that is
But like,
such a brutal trip. I can't even imagine. So Adelaide, Sydney, what did you say? Not Detroit, Dallas.
Dallas,
Adelaide,
yeah,
Sydney, Dallas, Boston. Whew. Dude, I'm like
yeah,
going from Chicago to Boston and
yeah,
one shot, right?
yeah,
And
and
you're
it's too
going
much.
from like, you're flying further just in the US than I
Mm,
am, right?
hmm
Dallas to Boston is even, oh
Yeah,
man.
yeah, and
Oh
the
boy.
whole reason that I booked those flights was because Qantas didn't show them as available. So I now know why. It's because they just weren't available, and they were still on Booking. And looking at the communication from Booking.com, they're a bit slow on the uptake. So it's possible that
Oh my
the flight
word.
sold out or had already been cancelled by the time I booked them, which is a bit frustrating. So, um,
Yeah, yeah,
but
that is.
but I booked those flights because it was a 1 p.m. flight, which meant I was leaving Re for less time. So I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
leave Sunday afternoon. I would
But you've got
arrive
2
Boston Monday
kids. That's a
morning.
consideration to make. Yeah.
Now the Adelaide Sydney flight is 6 a.m. on Sunday, so I've got to be
Oh boy.
at the airport 4 a.m., which means I've got
Oh
to get out
boy.
of here at
Yeah.
3:30. So it's a full day that I'll miss then. But the upshot is that assuming everything goes fine, I will be in Boston on Sunday night, which is also a downside because now I've got to pay for an extra night of
Yeah.
accommodation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll
Boy,
be there
geez,
Sunday
they
night. So
get you coming and
I'll get a
going
full night. I know, but I'll get a full night sleep in
before you have
Boston
to
now,
get and
ready to
jump into
go
the
for
festivities.
Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then I've got Monday, Tuesday,
Nice.
Wednesday, Thursday, so 4 full days, and then my flight out is Friday evening. So I aim to get to the airport probably about 1 o'clock. Just who
Okay.
knows what the
Yeah, yeah.
delays and timings are like over there at the moment. But
It's not
fortunately,
too bad. We just went to Phoenix and I mean we didn't have any delays at all.
yeah, cool.
There and back. It was totally fine.
Yeah,
So
I
I
mean,
think
you
it
don't
just
have to
depends
go
on the
through.
airport.
It'll be the customs. It'll be. I've
Oh,
got 3.5
customs.
hours
Sure,
in
sure, sure. Yeah,
Dallas
that
to
makes
do
sense.
customs on the way out, and then Boston will be. I get there 3.5 4 hours early. Hopefully, there's plenty of time to get through. Like, I don't mind sitting and waiting in an airport if it means making sure that I make my flight. And then LA is 2.5 hours, I think, on the way out. But everything's airside there. All the bags are checked through, so I just have to like get off one plane, move to Tom Bradley, and then come back out the other side. So should be okay, but it's
Okay.
been a
Well,
whole
I'm
saga.
glad.
And then
Yeah, I'm glad you got that
I had
figured out.
travel insurance, so I've
Uh-huh. Yeah.
because I bought the flights on the Amex. I've got like so I've
Oh,
tried
nice. Okay.
their
Built-in
complimentary
travel
insurance
insurance.
first. Yeah, so I've tried
Yeah.
that one first just to claim the cost difference in the flights because it's like I didn't not my fault. So we'll see what
Yeah.
happens. That's with them at the moment. So fingers crossed. I don't.
And a lot
And
of
then I
times that
just
like
only have
trip
to pay
insurance
the
is like, yeah, only if you're
yeah
sick or something like that.
yeah. Look, it's the difference between being out of pocket $250 and 2.5 grand. So
Yeah. Yep.
I'll take that.
Exactly. Yep.
But I
Yep.
thought
Yep.
I'd
For
give that a
sure.
go before trying the actual travel insurance that I purchased, just to because that way, because if I claim it on the travel insurance that I purchased, I would then have to buy another policy. So we'll see.
Yeah. Oh boy.
So there we go.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
fun,
glad you
fun
got
and
that worked
games.
out.
But
Glad to
yeah,
hear that you're
I'm
actually going
glad
to
I
make
figured it
it.
out
That's
now
wonderful.
at the
Yeah.
beginning of
No
April and not
joke.
like
Yeah.
2 days before I had to go, because I thought I will. Okay, what I'll do is I'll just book. I'll get a reward flight and fly Adelaide to Sydney so that I can get that connecting flight and then everything will be fine. But no, you can't do that. If you miss the first flight,
Yeah.
they cancel
They
the whole
cancel the
thing
whole thing.
as
Dang
a
it
no
all.
show.
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
like, well, there's no way that I was going to make the second flight anyway, the way that
Right.
they'd scheduled it. So, and everyone's
Yeah.
throwing their hands in the air. So let this be a lesson to you all. Do not ever use a third party service to book flights.
Mm-hmm.
Just use the third party. Me learning this the hard way, obviously. Use the third party service to find the flight, but then go and find the corresponding flight with the airline and book it with the airline. Because
We
if the
accidentally did
airline
this one
changes it,
time. Yeah.
then you
Good
deal with the
luck.
airline and the airline has to fix it.
We did this one time on accident and didn't find out. It was like a family vacation. We didn't find out until like 2 weeks before. And so we had to buy last minute flights. Thankfully, they were domestic, so it wasn't like insanely expensive.
Yeah.
But still, we paid more than we would have liked. And yeah, no fun. So same deal. We always just make sure we're booking on the site. And so it works better that way.
Or if you're going to use an agent, like a face-to-face travel agent, then
Yeah.
you have to go in
Yeah.
and physically see them. But
Yeah. Yep. Hey, speaking of
because now
festivities,
everyone's hands in the air and fingers pointing at everyone else.
that's
You
right. They
fix
tossed it
they
over the
fix
wall. Not my problem. Yep.
Mm.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of festivities, and I'm apologizing for yawning a bunch if you happen to be watching the live stream here. I got back to my house at 2 a.m. last night after watching Michigan win the NCAA men's basketball championship. That was pretty awesome. So we've been watching Michigan. So I'm from Michigan. My oldest is a big Michigan fan, and so we were watching, March Madness, all that stuff. I had Michigan winning all of my brackets, and
They were
it was
number
getting
one.
closer. Yeah, they were number one.
They were number one in the bracket. Yeah. And
Yep.
I literally only saw the last 30 seconds of the game. I didn't realize it was broadcast here on ESPN. But so it was the first time in like 47 years or something that they've won
Yeah.
the championship.
37 years. I was 3 years
37.
old. Yeah. Yep. So long time, long time. And so, yeah, it was kind of crazy. It just all lined up. So like this was a year that Michigan was doing well. Well, last year we watched Michigan win the Big Ten championship, which is like their conference. So we went and watched that in Indianapolis, which is only about 2.5 hours from us. But this year, the NCAA national championship was also in Indianapolis, which just lined up. Like that's again 2.5 hours. So it's like, how do we not go? So we scored some cheap tickets with people who were probably offloading their tickets for when Arizona lost, or when Duke lost, or something like that, and scored some sweet seats and drove over there yesterday afternoon, watched the game, watched Michigan win, which was awesome. So cool. Got some great photos, had a great time, and then made our way back here. And so I have not yet caught up on that sleep quite yet. So we will see. We might make this one a little bit shorter if I can make it through. We'll see. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Had a good time, and I actually got to see some of my friends from my neighborhood when I was growing up. So being from Michigan, some of the guys that I grew up with were big Michigan fans as well, and they were there last night. And so I texted them. And so, kids I grew up with from when I was like, like literally a kindergartner through like sixth grade, got to see them for a little bit. That was pretty cool. So yeah, so that's been fun. So we did that yesterday.
You're in Bloomington Normal. You're from Michigan. I'm just looking at a map because I don't know your geography.
Yeah,
okay, Michigan's over there on the other side of the lake in India. Oh, so and Indianapolis is
kind of in between.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So there's the Great Lakes, and then you have like the Midwest, right? So there's Michigan, which is the little hand, and then you've got Ohio, and going from start like Michigan and Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin. That's sort of like the Midwest right there. And I've lived in every one of those states except for Ohio. My wife has lived there. So I am a Midwestern boy through and through. Been in all of them. And so, yeah, it was a really, really fun time. Had a great time doing that. And, yeah, but back at it, ready, raring to go. So I'm curious to hear what you've been working on. I got a couple obscure things that we've been doing. I could start with. So the first one is basically that we've wanted a central place to manage all of our failed jobs. Do you guys have multiple applications that you run, or pretty much just like one?
No, just the main,
just like one big mono repo
application for us. Yeah.
So we've got literally like 20 applications. You've seen it. You've seen our GitHub organization, and so we've got a bunch of them. And each sort of application does its own specific thing. And so a bunch of them have, their own queued jobs and failed jobs and stale jobs and all that stuff. And we don't have Horizon on all of them. Otherwise, we could manage them all individually through Horizon. But even at that, like, I feel like the failed jobs and retrying on that stuff is a little bit flaky in Horizon. I don't know if you've ever experienced that or not. But like retrying failed jobs in there, it's a little bit weird. It's like they cached for a while, and so you retry a job, but it looks like it's still failed. It's weird.
I don't know that there's any there's no assumptions in Horizon about available technology. So it like polls. So sometimes it seems stuck because it's just waiting for another poll event to, it's not.
Yeah.
There's no pusher or echo or anything like that. So
yeah, and so it's fine, and it's not like it's abandonware. It's been around for a long time though. But it's just there's no updates and anything like that happening with it, and it's completely out of our hands. There's really not a whole lot we can do. So I'm wanting to pass off the handling of failed jobs and things like that to one of my more junior guys, because it's like they can press a retry button and all that stuff. But there's a couple challenges. Like number one, how do you get all that data out of those locations to a central location where we can manage them without having to log into all the different boxes or having to install Horizon on all those things? And then how do I get the payload, and how do I, get the exception and be able to inspect all that stuff just like I would in Horizon? And then the other piece is really wanted to be able to track failures across multiple retries. So for example, if I have something that is like, I want to note this file, if somebody happens to be in a file and it's locked, the memo is locked, you cannot note that file. So what we'll do is we'll try and note it, and if it fails, we'll back off. If we'll try and note it again in 30 seconds, and then we'll back off for 60 seconds, and we'll back off for 3 minutes. And if they still happen to be in that file by the time that that last one fails, we just kick it to the failed jobs table, right? So we can see in the failed jobs table sometimes that there was 3 attempts. But if I retry that thing and it continues to fail, I want to know not that there's 3 new attempts. I want to know that we already tried it 3 times before, and now we've tried it 6 times. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
No way to do that. There's really no built-in way to do that. And secondarily, if you are using the database driver and not the Redis Horizon driver, the attempts are not stored anywhere in the failed job. It's not in there. If you're using Horizon and Redis, it stores the attempts in the payload and the JSON payload that's stored on the failed jobs, but not with database driver. So we had to figure out a way to store the attempts, both for the database driver, but then I wanted to persist those across failed jobs. So this is where it got really interesting. So I would talk through 2 pieces. Number 1, we created a package. Andy actually created a package. Andy Hinkle created a package, and he called it Dead Letter. I don't know why. It was just like all of our package names were super, super boring, like actually just what they are. And so he called it the Dead Letter package. I'm like, great, cool, sounds fun. And so I made a little PNG like logo for it. It's like a piece of mail. It's got its tongue stuck out in X's fries. It's great. And so what we did is he utilized kind of he borrowed from Horizon for how it pulls failed jobs and pending jobs from the queues, and he applied that across the different drivers. So if you're using the database driver, he can pull the failed jobs this way. If you're using the Redis driver, he can pull the failed jobs this way. And what it does is just basically opens up these API endpoints that allow us to call, give me the failed jobs. It will give me a paginated response with the payloads, with the exceptions. It's secured with something similar to Sanctum. And then I can also have an endpoint at that same on that same app that allows me to do a retry single, retry all, or delete a failed job, right? So those are the 4 endpoints, right? Give me all the information about all the failed jobs. Give me all the information about all the pending jobs. Allow me to retry a single, retry all, or delete a single. And so that's what the package does, is it essentially exposes those endpoints, which is really cool. But the way that Laravel does failed job handling is that it has in the container, it has bound to something called queue.failer. So there is a specific class that is responsible for essentially serializing the job and then pushing it onto the failed jobs table. So what we had to do is we had to override that, and we had to store our own information in the payload of the job before it got saved to the failed jobs table. So that when we hit that API endpoint and get that data out, the payload information that we need is stored in a custom key inside of that payload. Now, Sentry already does this, as does Nightwatch, as does other things. I never recognized that, but it does. And so we borrowed similarly.
Like, what's the word? Precedent, like established convention for doing this.
Yes. And there's actually this thing called queue save payload using. And so what that allows you to do is that actually allows you to save the payload using like your own sort of closure. But that doesn't happen at the time of failure. That happens at the time of queuing. A little bit different. So here's the caveat. Overwriting the failer allows you to inject items into the payload, which is great. However, the failer does not know anything about the attempts at that time. Right. It doesn't know anything about attempts. And so what you have to do is you have to do 2 things. Number 1, you have to override that failure, but number 2, you have to listen to the job failed event. The job failed event does know about the job and does know about the number of attempts. So what you have to do is you have to say, listen for that, grab the app queue.failure, write the number of pending attempts to a property on that queue failure, and then sort of be like, okay, I'm done, knowing that in just a second that failure is going to get used And then when you're getting that failure, you fail that queue failure, you basically grab that number of attempts off of the global queue failure now and write that into the payload. And so the couple things that we got, which were interesting here, is now, regardless of which driver we're using, database or Redis, we can get the number of attempts, but we can also get the total number of attempts, because if it's been retried previously, we just increment that amount, right? So we can say it's been retried most recently 3 times, but its total been tried 6 times or 9 times or 12 times or whatever. We also can say, give me the original failure date and then give me the most recent failure date. So I can see when it very first started failing. If I've retried it since then, I want to know, here's when it was most recently retried, but it's actually been 5 days since it was supposed to run 5 days ago. So these are things that you don't get when you retry a failed job right now. If it fails again immediately, it just looks like, oh yeah, it was retried earlier today. You're fine. It's only a day old. It's not a day old. It's actually multiple days old. And it says, I tried it 3 times. No, you didn't. You tried it as many times as you've retried it. And so these were sort of pain points that we had previously that weren't really obvious, and can be things that are difficult to debug too, because you retry these failed jobs and then you sort of wait for them to come. They get queued up again, right? So you have to wait sometimes minutes or hour, sometime for those things to get run again. And so it's not super simple for somebody who's responsible to debug those things to know, has this failed before? And so now we know. And so in those instances where we have like, note this file and it's failed 6 times, we can look at it. Oh, actually, that's not a valid file number. Somebody typed one in wrong. All right, delete that job, So it's been super cool. So now that we have version 1.0 released, we're putting it across all of our repos, which also has been super fun, using Claude and GitHub Copilot to create issues and then just assign Copilot to the issue. I've been doing that recently. So just say hey, go create the issue and then assign Copilot, and Copilot will create a draft PR. And then I just have to say, yep, ready for review, run the tests, and then approve and merge. It's pretty cool. So yeah, that's been really interesting, and super, super helpful. So that's my most recent one. I've got 2 other things after that, after you go. So we'll see how much we have time to talk about, but that's my first adventure.
So this package is called Dead Letter. Now, Dead Letter is a computer science term. It is a specialized message queue used to store messages that cannot be processed or delivered by a messaging system.
Did not know this.
Safety net for invalid, expired, or failed messages, sometimes called poison pills, preventing them from stalling the main system and allowing for analysis, debugging, and reprocessing. So yeah.
Wow. It's like a perfect name. Absolutely. Now, I wonder if he knew that or if he just asked Claude for some good names.
Andy Hinkle knew that.
I don't know. I'm going to ask him tomorrow. We'll find out. Maybe he did. Because I remember being like, why did you name it? He's like, I don't know. I just thought it was a good name or whatever.
Well,
I was like,
when this episode comes out, Andy, I'm in your corner. I believe that you knew it. And Jake's
I'm
skeptical.
I'm not skeptical. It's not that I don't think Andy's a smart guy. He's very intelligent. I just don't know that. I don't remember having a discussion. I feel like he would have told me that at the time, but maybe he did and I just wasn't paying attention. I have no idea. It's very possible. So anyway, if you need that code, let me know. I can hook you up with it. It's actually the queue portion that we just talked about is pretty simple. The actual API endpoints are a little bit more complicated, but not by much. It's a cool package. We could probably open source it if we cared to, but
yeah, you know what? As someone who's in the throes now of conference planning and talk review and things like that, I think not as a way to sell the package, maybe throw the name of the package in there at the end, but talk through the process of what you just said, going through the failed jobs, the events that get fired, the queue failure, talking about the anatomy of a failed job and why you might want more information. I think that would make for a super interesting talk.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, where this year we're just a sidestep, I guess, to Laracon AU. This year we're looking for talks that are not necessarily more technical talks, but talks that are much more practical and that show much more depth of exploration. And so, knowing that you've gone through this whole process to kind of understand what it is that is failing, knowing that you need to have more information and that you need to be able to track these failures over an extended period of time to see the true number of job failures as opposed to just the first retries worth of failures. I think that kind of thing really fits in that mold of like practical real world insight of what you discovered and how you built it out. And so anyone that's kind of like on the fence about submitting to speak at Laracon AU, again, this is the kind of stuff that I think would be if you had the presentation style. And I think Andy's given a couple of worldwide meetup talks and things like that in the
Yep.
past. I think definitely it's the kind of thing that you would want. I mean, not that I get to say, we've actually got I put together a committee this year to go through talk submissions just so that we can kind of get some different perspectives on how the schedule and the program comes together this year. Um, Historically, I've always done it as a bit of a storytelling exercise, not really having any preconceived notion around what talks go on the schedule. I know that roughly I want some number of technical talks and some number of non-technical talks, but it's often hard to gauge, particularly if you've seen some of the even our previous CFP submission form. We ask for a title and an abstract, and it's kind of up to this potential speaker to figure out what they put in there and how they sell their talk. So often it's difficult to get a sense of what is actually going to be presented based on that, and it can like change over time, and it's not necessarily a fully fleshed out thought. This year we've kind of gone into a little bit more structure in terms of asking who the audience target is in terms of skill level, in terms of experience with the framework, in terms of what are the real world takeaways? What did you learn? Where have you actually used this in a production context or in a real world context? And what do you expect that the audience will know differently, or be able, something that they're going to see differently based on hearing your talk? And so I think the exploration, as I said, of what you and what Andy went through to figure out, okay, this is how we tackle it. This is what is and isn't available, and where it is and isn't available, and what we need to do to address that, to then eventually end on this dead letter package,
Mm-hmm.
would certainly fit that thing that we're looking for. But the committee this year is again to have different perspectives. So it's not just me going, yeah, I think that's interesting to me. As the community's grown and the event's grown and all of that kind of stuff, it's harder to kind of get that cross section and that balance right. So this year we've kind of like structured the entire program over 2 days, and then it's a matter of getting the talks to fill those spots.
Oh, nice.
And so
Okay, that
having,
makes sense. So, instead of just being like, bring whatever you want, it's more like we have slots for these specific types of things, and it's like you're looking for speakers to fill those things. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So it's not specific topics, but it's like we want an advanced architecture talk over here, and we want an intermediate tools talk over here, and a beginner product or beginner career talk over here. So we know what the structure is. We know how that's going to flow across the 2 days. We plan to like stretch beginners. We don't want anyone to get left behind, but we want them to get seeds of ideas and things that, maybe in 6 months, they'll be like, I remember this talk I saw at Laracon and this all makes sense now. But at the other end of the spectrum, this is a challenge, I think, for all of the Laracons to balance, all of the Laravel events, in any conference event really, is to balance like the more advanced talks. If you've been programming for 10, 15, 20 years, now is a little bit different because AI, and that is like the new thing. But take AI out of the equation for a sec. If you've been programming for 10, 15, 20 years, you've probably seen a lot of things and you know a lot of things and you understand the framework to a very high degree. So it's much more challenging to have a talk, I think, that appeals to that group of people. So you're not really teaching people anything quote unquote new in that situation. If I'm a 20-year person speaking to you, another 20-year person, we have roughly a similar set of experiences and understanding of the framework. That's not to say that it's not possible. I think it's just much because there's less people ahead of you at that point to teach something new, if that makes sense.
Well, it's like you have a larger foundation as well. So like, for example, I didn't have to explain the container to you and how there's like a q.failure bound in the container. Like that requires zero explanation. A junior, that's a 15-minute conversation.
Right.
They don't even know what is that. What are you talking about? Why are you binding a string? Why would the framework isn't there a class? Is there a contract behind that? Do you have to implement a contract? Should you use a trait? Like all of those things, it's like you already know what I'm talking about. Like and you understand the trade-offs and all that. And so it's like I don't know. It's yeah. So you can talk and get through things a lot faster if you've been using it for a long time. Whereas like
Mm,
if you're trying to sort of split the difference, you do have to sort of handhold a little bit some of those things and carry them along with you and sort of realize, okay, where is everybody else in the audience at? Caleb
right.
Porzio actually had a really good talk, or not a good talk, but a good podcast, Notes on Work. And he was talking about how a lot of these tweets that he's seeing about Claude stuff, whenever he's like, they're getting like thousands of likes, and he's like, how? Like this
Mm,
is all stuff that you can learn if you just read the docs. And
right.
he's like, I think we think that people know more than they do. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, he
Yeah.
said, in order to be an educator, you have to assume that people don't know what you do, and you almost have to like pretend that you don't know it either, and like explain it in a way that like if you didn't know it, this is how you'd talk to yourself about it.
Mm,
And that's a very difficult thing to do after you've been doing this for so long. It's like when I was a math teacher, I had a very difficult time teaching addition and some of these very basic things to my kids who were really young at that time. I'm like, I don't teach that. Like it's
yeah.
assumed knowledge by the time you get to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how to tell you how
Correct.
to do that. It's just you just have to know it. And I can
Yeah.
teach you advanced math stuff, but I can't teach you the basics.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to kind of go backwards and put yourself in the mindset of somebody who does not know a lot of things
Yeah.
and make it
Yeah.
approachable.
I also think that that kind of compromises the talks that could be more advanced,
Yeah.
purely because you understand that the audience, is people who have never attended an event or have only
Mm,
just started their programming journey. And you know that the audience has got people that have been doing it for 15, 20 years.
yeah. Yeah.
I think it compromises the integrity of the talk if you try and cater because you spend, okay, I've got to spend 3 minutes, 5 minutes explaining this what is fundamental to you as a presenter because you know that there's people that don't understand that. And that's where I think we've been very intentional, or we intend to be very intentional with how we put the program together this year. That if you submit an advanced talk, the expectation is that it is an advanced talk
Yeah.
and that you will mention things that, as I said, it may not make sense to someone in the audience now and they may feel a bit lost. And we understand that. Like I've modeled and planned for attrition in certain talks where we expect that some percentage of the audience won't sit in on a talk that is going to be above their head. But there will be some people that sit in those sessions and they will hear something that, as I said earlier, that may make sense to them in 6 months once they've had more exposure to the framework. So I don't think we should coddle the the
Agreed.
newer people at the expense of the older people. There will be talks this year. Just looking at what we've had submitted so far and what the committee has been through in terms of review already, there will be
Yeah.
talks that cater to all the different levels. And the intent is that we will stretch beginners, but we won't alienate anyone at either end.
Yeah.
There will be
Yeah.
talks for everyone. And I think, we were close to the mark last year. And it's not like a drastic change to the program. I think if we get two or three more really good quality, more advanced, more technical, more architectural talks, whatever the case may be, I think it balances that out a little bit better. With the understanding that everyone is talking to their audience. We
Yeah.
ask you to define who you're speaking to in your talk. We're asking, what the prerequisites are. What should someone coming to this talk know so that when they get there, they understand the level that, okay, this may be a little bit beyond me, but I'm still interested in the subject. And we're going to publish all of that straight away when we put the schedule live. When the time comes after we've selected all the speakers, the talk title, the talk abstract, the prerequisites, the insights, all of this,
I
we're
think
just going to
that's
publish it from
incredibly
day one.
helpful to let people know kind of what they're getting into. And so like if it's
Yeah,
for them like either A, I don't know this at all. This is an appropriate time for me to take a break, or A,
right.
I know all of this already. or
Yeah,
or B, I know all of this already, sort of deal.
yeah. And as I
So
said, I've kind of modeled for people that won't be in there. Some people that will take that opportunity to go stretch their legs. They'll go and have a break. They'll continue a conversation knowing that this next talk is not for me.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so at any given time, this will fluctuate. The plan is that like roughly the same number of people are always in all of the talks, but
yeah. Mm-hmm.
who the makeup of those talks will shift a little bit. And I think, I mean, it should be seen it's the first year we've done it, but I have certainly tried to be very intentional with how we're putting it all together this year. So
Very
If it
cool.
works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But
Yeah.
it's, we're trying something different this year because, the the formula has worked for the first 5 years. I think it's time to just give it a little bit of a twist this year, in
No,
terms
I
of how
love that.
we structure it.
It's still single
And I've
track.
brought in, yeah, it's still single track.
So because those, some of the what you're talking about, like with the abstract and like requirements, or a lot of times those are commonplace at like multi-track events. You know what I mean? Where like
mm,
a person has to make a decision, which one do I want to
yeah,
go to? You know what I
yeah,
mean? So I think it's really good that you're bringing that into a single track environment where you're allowing them
mm.
basically to say, am I going to choose hallway track, or am I going to go to the actual talk? And you're giving them
I
enough
mean,
information to make an informed decision. So it's good.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's still a Laracon. We're still going to have Laravel
Yeah.
themed and Laravel adjacent talks. It's just having an understanding that there are different people in the audience and knowing, how much value you'll get out of how many talks ahead of time, I think is going to be really important this year. And I don't, sometimes you see a talk title when you come into a talk and you go, oh, that wasn't what I
It's different
expected.
than
And
what I thought it was.
sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a bad thing, to that person. So I think giving them the full context, and then there's no, it's not up to interpretation of, I thought that, the title meant this, and it was actually something completely different. Which, I think over the years, I have seen some speakers game that, whether intentionally or not. But
You have a
when
really
all you're
catchy title.
presenting, yeah, but when all you're presenting to the potential audience is the name of the speaker and the title of the talk in advance, the title is doing all of the work there. It's the heavy
Yeah.
lifting.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's an interesting looking talk and I want to go and see that. Well, now I want to make sure that people know exactly what they're getting so that they can make an informed decision. And I think, I've got four other people on the review committee with me. Um, People from different backgrounds. I'll just name them, like Kath Young, who's spoken at a couple of Laracons. Dave Hicking is another
Nice.
person that I've got on the committee. Chris Williams and Vicky Suzuki, who's been an attendee at every Laracon AU, I think, except for the first one. So
That's pretty
I've
good track
I've
record there.
I've
Yeah.
tried to, but because Vicky's been there from basically day one. Um, so she has seen how the program has taken shape, and each of these people have got their own thoughts and opinions on what makes for a good talk, and they may see things differently or the same as other people, but also years of experience as well. I can't. It's much more difficult, as you said earlier, for me to put myself in the shoes of a beginner or someone who's 5 to 7 years of experience, because that was a long time ago for me, and that's not the frame of reference that I have anymore. I'm not living it anymore, so it's harder to remember it. So having people that are seeing it, Dave, who is more from the product and community side, like seeing those talks from that level, Chris and Kath looking at it from like a more of a oversight mentorship kind of senior level, and then Vicky looking at it from more of the intermediate level. I think that will help kind of scale it. And then we look at, where we disagree, where we agree, where we think that the submissions are going to be well positioned versus not. And so we'll come to um, a program at the end of it that I think will be balanced across all of those different dimensions.
No, I think that's good. It's like, it's always a challenge. So having a plan at least gets you, doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, but you definitely have a better chance at
Yeah,
getting it right if you have a plan. Yeah.
yeah,
Nice. That's awesome.
for sure.
Okay. So I've got enough energy to do one more thing, or if you want to talk about something that you're working on, we should do that. And I'm going to grab a
Oh, do
drink
it.
when
Let's talk another Jake.
okay. Okay. All right. So here we go. Axios. Which one? What do you
Axios.
call it?
Yeah, I
Axios.
say
Okay.
Axios. Yeah.
All right. So there was a compromise. There was a version 1.14, I think, used all
Mhm.
over the place. Laravel's used it for forever. Inertia just dropped that dependency just before version 1.14 was
Mhm.
compromised, whatever. We probably all read the post-compromise sort of like, post-mortem sort of thing. Supply chain attack, terrible. It happens. And so now we're all scrambling to sort of figure out, was I compromised? Number one. Number two, if I was compromised, what keys do I need to rotate? All that stuff. Okay. So, in that vein, I looked through our situation, and what we are dealing with is that we don't run we don't typically, unless we're building something on the view side of things, we're not typically running I don't know. We don't like have to install our dependencies all the time, right? So none of us were actually compromised. We didn't in all of our package lock files, none of them had version 1.14, so we were fine. However, our environment in the cloud, right? So it builds our assets in like a Docker container sort of deal.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, well, what sort of sensitive secrets do we have in there? Ooh, boy, actually, a couple, right? Now, that's a little bit scary. Like, you'd think, like, okay, my GitHub secrets are safe. Like, I should not really have to worry about the secrets that I have inside of my GitHub actions because they're stored inside of GitHub, and GitHub's architecture is very safe and secure, and they should be fine.
Mhm.
Unless there is something like this, which basically almost gets remote code execution and is able to dump all the stuff from that Linux container out to wherever you want. And if those tokens happen to be long lived, well, now you're screwed, right? So, one of the things that I found is that we were using a personal access token of mine, which is
Mhm.
not great. Um, for multiple reasons, right? For example, if I left the company and was removed from the organization, that personal access token is no longer valid. And every single one of our applications that relies on that personal access token now fails. So good
Mhm.
luck figuring that out. Have fun with that one. So that's the first thing. But also, those tokens live for at least a year. The max amount of time
Mhm.
you can do right now is, I think, 365 days. That's set by our organization, but you can do them for longer than that, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's a big problem because if something like Axios was able to run that post install command and it was able to dump those keys out, that personal access token that you have now, if you had given it broad permissions, which, oops, again, we did,
Mhm.
it now has the ability to not only read from your repositories, which could be damning, similar to like what happened with Claude, dump all the open source, dump it out to the web, and now all your code is open source. Or also they can write and do another supply chain attack. They can bury something inside of your code that you don't even know is there, and it's doing crypto or extracting credit cards or whatever it
Yeah.
is. You know what I mean? It could do all sorts of nonsense. And so I went on a mission to be like, okay, we need to change this. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to use short-lived tokens that only had very limited access to a specific set of repos, and at that the only permission they had was read. And so this was a bit of a journey. Now, we've talked about this before, that inside of GitHub Actions you have a thing called GitHub underscore token, which is a short-lived token that gives access to do a couple different things in that repo only, not across your organization, but in that repository only. So, like, for example, if it wanted to read from something else in your repository, read from an issue, read from a pull request, read from another action that's running to check on the status of another thing, it can do that. That GitHub token, which is injected by default into your actions, has access to do that. However, in our case, what we needed is we needed the GitHub token that had access to be able to download as a composer dependency other repositories that are private repositories inside of our organization.
Mhm.
So here's the way that we had to do this. And this was all, this was a pairing with Claude. We had to create a GitHub a GitHub application for our organization. This is really easy. You basically just go into your organization's settings and you say the bottom left, it says like GitHub applications, and you create a new one. And what you can do with that is you can say, here is the permissions that it needs, and here are the places where it can be installed. So I can say it needs to be able to read from repositories. And secondly, it only should be able to be installed in our organization. That's the setup. That's it. Then what you have to do is you have to install that application to your organization. And this is what we've all seen before, where like if I install Sentry into my organization, it says, do you want to give it access to all your repositories or only select repositories or whatever? And so when you install this private GitHub application, you then say, I want only to give access to these specific repositories. And the application itself says, I only need read access to those things. Wonderful. That's great. Now, the third step is inside of your GitHub Actions, there is a managed little service that allows you to issue or not issue, sort of generate mint. It's to mint. It will mint a token for you for like 15 minutes. I think as short as 15 minutes, but as long as up to an hour. But the additional thing that you can do is you can say, when I'm minting that token, I want you to only mint that token to give access to these repositories. There's a repository key, so you can further scope that thing down and say, for this application, I only need access to this one repo as a dependency. And so if that token did get compromised, two things. Number one, it only lives for 15 minutes. Number two, it only has read access. And number three, it only has access to the repositories that were absolutely necessary for it to be able to do its thing. So we deployed that again. Like I used GitHub, Copilot, CLI, and just said like create an issue on all of these applications, and then go assign Copilot to it and take care of it. And it just did it. It ripped through all of our repos, went through all of the actions, ripped all the specific token stuff. I deleted that GitHub token, and that took a day. And I feel so much better. I'm sleeping better at night because it's like, number one, those tokens are like, it doesn't matter. Like I can, if they got it, it would basically be able to do nothing, which makes me feel so much better. And so that was really, really nice. And the process to do it was not actually that complicated. And so if you have personal access tokens that you're using inside of your GitHub Actions, be careful, be very careful. Either really restrict the scoped, use a fine-grained token and make sure it only has lockdown access to that, or use this process where you create that custom GitHub app, restrict what it can do, and then mint these short-lived tokens, and away you go. My last piece on that, which I have not finished yet, but is something I'm working on, is OIDC, which is OpenID Connect, which is a connector between GitHub and AWS, which allows you to do the same thing for AWS tokens. So that if you need to, as part of your CI process or part of your testing process or whatever, if you need to be able to write to an S3 location or whatever you might have to do, you can mint a very short-lived token that gives restricted permissions to a particular thing only for a very short period of time. And again, they're blown away within 15 minutes. And so much safer in the case of these sort of remote code execution things. They dump all those keys. You don't have to worry about it rotating them, because by the time the thing is disclosed that it was a problem, those tokens are already rotated. They're all dead already anyway. There's nothing to do. And so that was sort of my goal, is like, if this had happened to me, what would I have wanted to do to prepare for this in advance? I'm going to do that right now. And so the next time it happens, hopefully we're much more prepared. So anyway, a couple pieces of security stuff to do there, just to make sure that you're not sort of having to fret about that stuff all night long, So
I look forward to your blog post on it.
Yeah, maybe I will. That'd be great.
After you rebuild your blog, because you haven't used it for how long?
Exactly. I got to do that. Seriously.
Same as me.
Just tell Claude to do it.
Yeah, that's right. And then you'll end up with a site that looks remarkably like mine.
Yeah, and TJ, I think, right? You guys
Me
both
Chris,
did your sites. Or Chris, that's right. Yeah, but they look good. That's the thing. I mean, they look good.
Looks good, yeah.
Anyway.
Sweet.
All right, man. 180 or 190? It was not 190.
190.
Right? Episode 190. All right, show notes for this episode at northmeetsouth.audio/190. Hit us up on Twitter, on X, on Blue Sky, at Michael Jordan, Jacob Bennett, or North South Audio. If you like the podcast, rate it up in your podcatcher of choice. 5 stars would be awesome. All right, friends. Thanks so much. Michael, next time you get to do all the talking. I'm going to let you just take it and run next time.
All right. I'll have to come up with something to talk about.
All right. Sounds good, brother, man.
All right. No worries.
All right. Thanks. See you, buddy.
Bye.